Thank you everyone for coming. Today, as the slide says, we're going to be talking about what's new in Creo Illustrate 10.0. So we'll just jump right into it. So this is sort of the short list of what we're going to be talking about today. We did some improvements around storing content inside of Windchill. There's some new filter and find capabilities, font selections, arrowhead options, leader lines, as well as other updates. So without further ado, and as always, feel free as I'm going through the slides to be posting questions, and I will answer those to the best of my ability as we go through it. If you come up with a question later on in the deck that refers back to something we've already covered, just make sure you let me know which slide, in essence, you are talking about, so that I can answer the question appropriately. So with that, let's get going. So this first capability, improved 3D content storage in Windchill. What we've done here is given the ability to not store the 3D information inside the C3DI file. So what this allows is for less storage in Windchill, because now we're not duplicating all of that PVZ data inside the C3DI file. So we link back to that source illustration content. One of the other things that this gives is it removes, in certain contexts, that 4 GB limit. We have more and more customers that are trying to, upload larger and larger data sets into Windchill through Creo Illustrate, and this, gives or basically we've been hitting what is in essence a 4 GB upload limit for any single transaction. So with this, we'll just be uploading a C3DI file that has no 3D content in it, which is the bulk of the data that's in there, and just link back to that PVZ file. So when you do your server-side publishing, we will reach out, collect that PVZ, do the publishing according to your publish rules and how you have your figures and all that set up. But now the C3DI file is much smaller, uploads much quicker, those kinds of things. Now, right now, this is Creo Illustrate 10 and Windchill 13, but we are planning on backporting this to Windchill 12.0.2 and 12.1.2. We just need to plan which CPSs that this will be a part of it, because it does require a change on the Windchill side. And you would also need to make sure that you have, in essence, the Creo Illustrate 10 server-side worker to finish that out. So I'm not going to demo this one because the only thing that you would really see is it takes less time to upload to Windchill. So does anybody have any questions specific to the new way of storing content in Windchill?
I do see one come through, Jeff.
Okay.
From Jason Standard. So for the improved 3D content storage, is the data still stored in the C3DI if the PVZ is embedded versus linked, or does it not make a difference?
So once you turn this ability on, any C3DI file that you upload, even if it's just a new iteration, will follow this workflow. The older iterations will not be impacted. We're not going to go in and remove the 3D data from already stored C3DI files. So this would only impact new C3DI files or a new iteration of an old C3DI file. But it's not going to, we're not going to go back through and remove content. So if you open a C3DI file from Windchill that happened to already store that data in it. When we, you make some changes and then we go and we re-upload that file, then 3D content, in essence, will not be re-uploaded. We will just maintain a link back to that source PVZ that was the origination of it. So does that answer your question? Oh, for the embedded part, embedded is just that. It only exists inside the C3DI file. When you're working from Windchill, though, it should always be a linked piece of content as opposed to embedded. Now, as it says here, though, if you do save local to your machine or to a local file server, so to speak, we do package it inside the C3DI file just the same way we've always done. So this really only impacts if you're using this workflow with Windchill.
He says question. So thank you, Jeff.
Okay. Any more questions?
Nothing else coming through now. Oh, something did come through. Okay. Some more, Roger. Does this only work with post-published PVZ files?
Yes, that part of the workflow has not changed. You still need that illustration source PVZ as part of this workflow. And one of the main reasons we do that is even if you were to open any file, whether it's from Windchill or from your local machine, the first thing that Creo Illustrate would do is be converted to PVS and OL before it even tries to display it. So there's no point in doing that where you would be reprocessing the data every single time you opened it. So we just pre-process it the once, and then you open that information into Creo Illustrate, and we don't have to process it every single time it gets opened, slowing down the workflow and that kind of thing. Does that answer the question?
And then another question that come through, I missed, it looks like from Gary Spencer. Can CAD models be opened directly from Windchill in this release, as opposed to having to export it to a local folder?
No, we still do not directly open the native CAD formats from Windchill. Again, the primary reason we do that is every single time you do that, we are then reprocessing the data into PVS and OL files before we display anything. So it doesn't make any sense to open the native CAD file, regardless of the source of it, directly into Creo Illustrate. Otherwise, again, you're just taking that time to reprocess it every single time instead of just opening a source content that's already been processed. All right. Anything else on this topic? Okay. So on to the next one. So the next one up is the new filter and find capability. So we've done some enhancements here where you can actually dynamically search the tree structure, which makes it much more responsive in your ability to find specific information that you're looking for. You can also do searches across attributes. We remember searches, those kinds of things. This one I'm actually going to demo. So we'll jump into that. So you can see here, I have Creo Illustrate 10. If you'll notice down here, though, instead of having the find button or filter button, it's now a text field. And there's also some additional options here that you can choose. Do you want to only search what's selected, what's itemized? So does it have a call out? That kind of thing. Assemblies or parts. And do you want it to actually select the result as you do that? So like right now, if I just do say 4591, it is dynamically searching and finding in the tree structure that result. If I choose this option with the select the results, then it does just that. And you can see even out here on the 3D stage, those parts are selected as well. So it makes it much more convenient to be able to search. Now, if I want to do something more sophisticated, I can go into the More button and it gives me this dialog. I can then go in and say, I also want to search on attributes. And I can make adjustments here. Do I want to ignore case or include bodies? So yes, multi-body, that kind of stuff. All of these options are available for you to choose from. And I can do the search and hit apply. And it gives me all the things that are spring. So if I selected one of these and I look at my attributes, you can see that there's the word spring, 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 so on. I can also specify a particular attribute field if I want. So, or I can get a bit more specific as to what attribute do I want to search against to see, because like in this case, I had a whole bunch of different attributes with the name spring in it. I might want to do something a bit more specific in that regard. Now, some of the other options that we have when it comes to this dynamic search. So if I go in here and I go to navigate and I want to use alternate part names. So I'm going to go into configure. And let's say I want to add another attribute to my name up here. And I go down here to choose part name and I insert the value. And just to make it a bit more legible, I'm going to put a dash in there. I'm going to click OK and apply. And now you can see I have my name values in here as well. So now if I go to search, I can search here for spring and it's giving me that result because it's searching everything that's listed here. Before, if I had typed spring, I wouldn't have gotten any result because it's not a named entity in here. So by adding that particular attribute field, I can now search for things by, in essence, by part name or a part of a part name, that kind of thing. Some of the other things that we can do here is we have different searches or different results. So if I do a find, let me expand this a little bit. You can see that it's showing me the breakdown of that level of the structure. It's not just listing what was found. If I do a filter, then it's giving me just what it filtered. And then I can also go down here to filter as list, in which case it's just going to give me a flat list as my result. So depending on how I want to view the results, I can do that. So does anyone have any questions on the new find and filter capabilities? I guess not.
I'm not seeing anything come through. Kevin Table just said nice addition. So.
Thank you. And for those of you that use Creo View as well, in 10.1, we are looking at adding this same capability to do a dynamic search.
Felix Reiber just said, can you repeat that with the names? You didn't catch the names.
Catch the names of what?
Can you repeat that with the names? I'm not quite following, Felix. Can you clarify?
Are you referring to like adding the names?
Add the article name.
Okay. So I'm assuming you're talking about if I go into field options, then I go to navigate under general, and then I go here alternate part names. That has to be checked. And then if I go into configure, then I can go through and add multiple attributes from any of these fields that happen to be in this model. And once I'll just pick one at random. I can insert the name, or I can also insert the value. So if, like, say I got rid of the part number, I could have it actually say part name dash and then the name of the part, that kind of thing. So depending on how I want to show this, I can configure it how I want to. And then for me, I always like to put the dashes and stuff in here just to separate things out. If I don't do that, then we show it exactly that way, and that becomes significantly less legible. So I like to put spaces and dashes and that kind of thing in there, so that it helps. Was that what you were asking, Felix?
He said, great, thank you.
Awesome. So any other questions in regards to this, or in how to add additional attributes and whatnot to your BOM names? Just keep in mind, if you do that, every once in a while you'll come up with a blank, simply because the engineer didn't actually fill in that particular attribute.
A couple more questions, Jeff. Can the attribute configuration be added to a standard?
Not just yet. We are working on, so if I go back in here, and I know this is a little bit off topic, but you'll see that this capability, this navigate, is under global. Right now, the standard only pertains to illustration. So, whatever I said in here becomes part of the standard. One of the things we're working on for a future release is adding, in essence, global preferences to the Creo Illustrate admin tool, so that you can set that this is basically global. You can think of this as the actual application settings that are independent of any individual illustration set. So once we have those global settings, you would be able to set that kind of thing up, so that you can set in essence, some standards for the basic application itself, and not just a set of illustrations. But we don't have a particular timeline just yet as to when we will be doing that, but that is one of the things in the backlog, is to allow you better control of the global settings. Now, for each user, so to speak, once you've set that up, it's persistent on that machine. So we do remember that in the global settings within Creo Illustrate. It's just not like part of the standard workflows just yet. So did that answer your question?
I believe it does, but I will wait for him. And the second one, Jeff, was off topic. When is CV 10.1 due out?
So CreoView 10.1 will release in December. Or November if we get done early. Like for Creo Illustrate and Creo View 10.0, we actually finished up almost a week early, so we released it at the end of May instead of the beginning of June. That kind of thing. But generally speaking, we always release, or our release target is June and December of each year. So June, December, June, December, June, December, that kind of thing. All right. Any other questions before we move on?
So there is one more. So we have the CI options that are changed. What file or files in the land load point are these settings saved?
Good question. I don't remember right off the top of my head if that's part of still part of the user pref or not. Because basically those the user pref and the admin pref, I'm assuming you're talking about the XML files. Both of them can contain some of the same things. My recommendation would be to go in, because to be honest, I don't remember off the top of my head, would be to set this option and then go look at the XML file and see which one that it dropped that into. But to be honest, I don't remember right off the top of my head. I'm assuming you're referring to the global settings and adding additional attributes to the listed name here. But I don't remember right off the top of my head which particular XML file that goes into.
We can probably get back to you on that, Gary, offline. And he's asking because we will be creating an install package.
Yeah. So like I said, I don't recall right offhand, although I will venture to say one of our targets for Creo Illustrate 10.1 is to make it easier to do remote preferences. So we are looking at adding that to the admin tool. The first iteration would be, like you're creating a set of options in essence that you're storing on a local file server somewhere, and then everybody goes to that and gets them. So you've got that one central location that everybody's pinging to see if there are changes, that kind of thing. The next iteration after 10.1, we're looking at being able to actually store all of these options in Windchill itself, so that whenever somebody logs into Windchill, if there are updates to your standard and that kind of thing, they would just download it directly and go. We also want to, again, this is future, subject to change, without notice, all that good stuff. We also want to use the Windchill libraries for like symbols and stamps and that kind of thing. So, all right. Let's see. Next up is font selection. So I know many of you have been pestering me for a very long time to be able to use something other than Arial. Now you can. In 10.0, you can use any font installed on the local machine, whether it makes sense or not. This is something that you set in the standard for that standard. It is not something that you would be setting yet anyway per like Callout or Note or things of that nature. So if you want to use something other than Arial, especially if you're publishing out to 2D, that kind of thing, you now have the option to do that. Just keep in mind that one of the reasons we waited so long to do that is when you're delivering live content via the internet and you're rendering it in a web browser, if that font is not installed on that machine, it's going to default back to Arial. So if you use a custom font and you're not publishing to something that allows you to embed a font in it, chances are that font will not show up if it's being viewed by somebody outside your company. So just keep that in mind when you decide to use various different fonts. If it's not one that comes standard with Windows, then there's a possibility that it's not going to show up. Whereas Arial is pretty much everywhere and free, that kind of thing. So. Any questions on this one?
Yes, there's something that came in, Jeff, library and all the resources, meaning images, icons, fonts, and so on, required to be connected online in order to use?
So we're looking at two abilities there. One is you could specify, do you want to, in essence, copy it local instead of having a live connection to Windchill for those assets? Because there is still the requirement in that regard to, in essence, be able to go offline. Now, so, and as part of that, we also want to enhance the ability to do license borrowing, which right now requires a command line to be able to do. So we want to be able to give you the ability to borrow a license much more easily within the user interface. And as part of that, in essence, copy local, the library, that kind of thing. Keep in mind that depending on how big your library it is, that could take a while. Those kinds of things. So we are looking at that. So it's not going to be, at least the plan right now, again, future-looking information subject to change. The plan is that we would not necessarily limit you to only doing one way or the other. You would be able to decide and set in your admin at the admin level, do you want people to be able to copy local, or do you want them to always use what's in Windchill? That's part of why we're not focusing on that piece for Creo Illustrate 10.1, is because there's a lot of nuance that we need to work through to make sure that we're not limiting people's capability or too, changing too much the current workflows and that kind of thing. So. But that is one of the topics that we have been discussing, is how best to accommodate both people that want to use the Windchill libraries versus still keeping the stuff local, especially the way people work remotely anymore. Did that answer your question?
Yes, noted.
Awesome. So, any questions about font selection before we move on to the next one? All right. So next up, Arrowhead options. So this one here adds the ability to specify that the arrowhead, even in the 3D space, is 2D. We had some suggestions from you nice folks that the 3D arrowhead, which is basically a cone, would, in essence, especially when you publish to 2D content, had a tendency to make the arrowhead look like it's changing size, because depending on the angle that you're viewing it from, it would change the shape relative to the line and that kind of thing. So what we've done here is we have added the ability to have the arrowheads always be 2D, even in the 3D space, so that they have that consistent look and feel and shape, that kind of thing. Now, one of the limitations here, though, is that this is not going to change existing arrowheads, unfortunately. There's still some more work that we need to do to be able to do that. There's there's a limitation that we have to overcome in how the arrowheads were originally implemented. But we didn't necessarily want to keep people from being able to do this because we do know that it has been a pain point for some, especially those that are trying to match, in essence, legacy content that they might have done an ISO draw or another tool where the arrowheads always stay the same size, that kind of thing. So that is another new capability inside of Creo Illustrate 10.0. Anybody have any questions on this one? All righty then.
One just came through from Tom. Will arrowhead points actually point at what they're supposed to point at, or do they still end up covering parts of the thing they point at?
So unfortunately, yes, the how they work stays the same as they have been. One of the things, future things that we want to do is not only correct that function where the anchor point is the explicit end of the arrowhead and not the end of the line, but we also want to give you the ability to actually format the arrowhead, height width ratios and all of those kinds of things, which would also make it easier for us to do halos and whatnot around the actual shape of the arrowhead as opposed to the font of the arrowhead. So those are things that are in the backlog that we want to get to, but they are unfortunately not in this particular release.
Okay. He seems to be crying emoji at that.
Yeah, we will get to it. It's just,
sorry, Tom.
Yeah, there's always more to do. But this is, in essence, this we saw as kind of a first step leading us in that direction to persist the arrowheads as a 2D element. Then that starts leading us into being able to make other changes in the code to get to that point of more visually appealing arrowheads, I should say. So, all right. If we have nothing else, I will continue on. This next one, leader line options. So what we've done here is given you the ability to say, I want my leader lines to always be in front. So you no longer get the dash, even if you're pointing through a bunch of other stuff. So it's pretty straightforward in how it functions. No matter where the call out is in relation to the part or how many things in the 3D space you might be passing through, this allows you to say, I want that leader line to actually be in front always, and it will be. I said it's a pretty straightforward capability that you can find. Notice here in the ribbon, when you select a call out, you get that call out toolbar. You can specify it there, or you can right click on the call out and specify it there as well. Any questions on this one? I know this has been another pain point for several of you. And this is, this is in line with several of the other things that we have going on within Creo Illustrate to start getting back to enhancing the day-to-day tools, the 2D, more traditional types of content. One of the things we're targeting in that line for 10.1, for those of you that still do 2D specifically, is we are adding the ability, again, future-looking information subject to change. We are adding the ability to create a blank 2D figure, even if you didn't load any 3D content into Creo Illustrate, and be able to use the drawing tools that we currently have. Of course, this is Creo Illustrate Professional that has the 2D drawing tools in it, so that you can start drawing from scratch without any 3D requirement to do so. You can still create a 2D figure from 3D, and you could create a blank 2D figure even if you already have 3D content as well. But this is kind of that first step towards allowing us to import legacy content that's just 2D. So we're building in that direction. So there are other things in that path that you can look forward to in the future as well.
Jeff, couple of questions coming through. This was asked in the forum, but didn't have a chance to follow up. Did you change the way that leader lines render in PDF for insets?
And I missed that.
Actually, sorry, let me repeat that. Did you change the way that leader lines render in PDF for insets? And there's a little bit more clarification, because it appears that those lines end up more dense and thinner in insets when rendered compared to lines outside the insets, which look pretty similar to the way they're presented in the figure.
That's something I'd have to go and check. To my knowledge, we didn't do anything specifically there. So that would be something that I would have to investigate to see if any of the work we've done has impacted that. I don't think there was anything specific in that regard that we looked into. But whenever we change anything about lines, sometimes there are other areas that get impacted.
Okay, and another question was, can this be default?
Unfortunately, not yet. Again, there are some things that we need to make further adjustments to be able to put this in as part of the standard. So today, you would be able to do it for an individual figure, in essence. You know, if you select all the callouts and then set this preference. But unfortunately, it's not a global setting just yet. That is in the backlog to do. But for right now, you'll need to set this on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, and another question, currently using Illustrate 7, does Illustrate support truly colored SVG output versus a PNG colored image included with the SVG output?
No, not yet. That is on, in essence, the 2D roadmap. To actually use fills as opposed to just in essence, a PNG or JPEG underneath the line art. We are looking at exporting SVG where the JPEG in essence is a companion file, so that we can actually have it compressed so that it's not super huge. That is another potential target that we're looking at for 10.1. But as far as doing, like proper filling, again, those are things on the 2D roadmap, along with, proper hatching patterns and tiling patterns and things like that. Those are all in the backlog as things to do, but there's a lot of things to do in that regard. So I can't say when specifically we would get to that, but it is one of the things that we want to get to. All right. Any other questions on leader line options? Although I know not all of those were leader line options, but.
Just a follow-up to that, Jeff, proper fill would be desirable. We currently have to process our SVG files using Adobe Illustrator to finish the artwork.
Yeah.
Noted.
Yep. All right. Next up, actually the last slide. To use Creo, well, actually any of the Creo 10 products. So this would be Creo Parametric, Creo Illustrate, Creo View, and so on. It does require the license server to be updated, assuming that you're using a license server. So it does need to be updated to 11.19.1 to be functional. So, and with that, I will open it up to other questions, which I know is risky, but hey, it's a Tuesday. Nothing?
Not seeing. Okay, something just came through. I guess it takes people some time to type it up, you know. Okay, so are there some improvements or changes to automatically clean up the sBOM from unused objects across all figures?
So there's two answers to that, so to speak, depending on are you talking about in the C3DI or in the published PVZ content. So in the C3DI, we don't remove anything because we don't know what you might want to make in the future. But if I go in here into Creo Illustrate and we look at the publishing rules, so if I look at my 3D stuff, if I check this box, and I'm assuming this is what you're referring to, this basically is saying that for any part, it needs to be visible, as in not hidden, in at least one figure. Otherwise, it will be removed from the published PVZ content. You know, if you're delivering live 3D. So if you check that box for your publishing of 3D content, we will remove anything that is not visible, as in this checkbox is checked. This is not going to, like, say you're showing an engine or something, or even in the case of this park brake assembly, you know, there's 30 some odd springs inside of it. You know, visibly I can't see them because they're inside, but they're still tagged as visible here. So if I check this box, we will remove it if it's tagged as not visible here in the structure. But if that's not checked, we don't do that because we don't know what your intention is downstream. If you want people to be able to view it, you know, if they desire to view it, then they could check that visible. But if your intention is that you don't want any extra parts, you know, going along with the PVZ content, check that box, and you know, as long as the part is not visible in any figure, then, or the visibility is not set to on, then it will be removed. So I'm not sure if that answers your question specifically, but that's what this check option is here for. Any other questions? Going once, going twice.
Okay, we have a pretty long one. Let's see through again. So from Tom, will we ever get a way to update items and figures based on on sort of a guided substitution when it comes to assemblies. We can now substitute single part file geometry and they get updated everywhere. However, if you replace an assembly with a nearly identical one, 95% of the same items, or even the same one with just the items, the item tree structure changed, every illustration has to be redone. If we could point which items are equal, just the way we point the constraints in Creo when replacing component, that would be great.
So we do have, or we are developing a plan, I should say. It's not that we do have one. We are developing a plan to address that, to make it much easier to do an update and recognize whether something actually changed or not. There is no timeline as to when we will be implementing that, but it is something that we've recognized needs some help to, especially if you're doing animation content and that kind of thing, to be better able to map the animation or position or colors and all that stuff from old part to new part, as well as just say, this is equivalent, as opposed to net new, that kind of thing. So we do have a plan to look into that, but we don't have a plan yet as to what that new capability would look like. But that is something we recognize that definitely needs some work.
Okay, there's another one. Are there plans for a simple function to model, for instance, cable?
That's a tricky one. It's something that we're investigating when we go and talk with various engineers and whatnot, or various engineering departments. There are a lot of conflicted interest there as to whether they want people outside of engineering modeling things or being able to affect geometry. So it is a conversation that is ongoing. One of the things that we will probably address first is the ability to duplicate. So in essence, like with these springs, if the engineer only put in one and you need 32, being able to duplicate the other 32, that kind of thing, especially when it comes to common hardware and that kind of stuff, that they don't always put in all the hardware that's supposed to be there, that kind of thing. But as far as modeling specifically, I wouldn't say that it's off the table, but we need to make sure that we're not violating trust, so to speak. And how do we allow some customers to do that and others not, depending on what their choice is as a company, that kind of thing.
Great, a few more coming through. Will we ever have the ability to export figures as a PNG with a transparent background? Our team has been hoping for that feature for a while.
So, if all goes well, you will have that in time for Christmas. So, being able to do PNG and TIFF with an alpha channel. Like I said, if all goes well, you should have that in time for Christmas. Assuming that for whatever reason, our delivery date doesn't slip till after Christmas.
All right, a few, it looks like follow-ups. Curious, do the tech pub groups ever get included in those conversations?
I'm assuming you're talking about like the modeling and duplicating geometries and whatnot. We do. I've had multiple conversations with various, engineering and tech pubs. Uh, in some cases, I'm even sitting across the tables from each other, which went about as well as you might expect. But it's, again, it's not necessarily something we don't want to do. It's just we need to make sure that however we do it, we're giving the option for somebody with, in essence, administrative privileges to say no. We don't want people to be able to modify geometry, because even that is nuanced. Like in the strictest sense, even showing like one of these springs in a compressed and non-compressed state is technically modifying the geometry, but it's not, in essence, changing the intent of the model. That kind of thing. So it's taking a little while to get through the conversations, but it's, it is something that's ongoing. If you would like to participate, feel free to reach out to me or reach out to me through your sales team. Be more than happy to have that conversation.
Okay. Just a comment from Tom. Yes, about the arrows. I was invited to contribute my opinion a year ago or so. Michael says, great to hear. Thanks. Aaron, speaking of unadded hardware, when constraining that hardware to its applicable hole, it seems I can only choose to constrain it to a part and not the applicable hole. Instead, I have to manually do this. I know there's an option in Creo Parametric to do this quite simply. Will this functionality be added to Creo Illustrate?
So, long answer. We are actually in the process of building Creo View SaaS. Next year, we will be starting to build Creo Illustrate SaaS as well. Again, forward-looking information subject to change. As part of that, we are also looking at, new workflows and whatnot. We don't want to just copy and paste what we've been doing on the desktop into those tools. As part of that, things like the measure tools, the assemble tools, all of that kind of stuff, we know is less than optimal for both products because they actually use the exact same tools. So that's one of the areas that we're focusing on as far as, how do we do that better? Once we figure out the better workflow and we've tested it, then our intention is to, in essence, backport that to the desktop tools as well. And for those that are, what would be a good way to put it? Apprehensive, because I said we're starting to build SaaS versions. The desktop versions are not going away. We absolutely know that not everybody can go to SaaS. But we're going to use that as, I guess you could say, the excuse to do radically new things and then figure out how do we, in essence, backport that to the desktop versions. So, or do we need a different workflow for the desktop versions from the SaaS versions, that kind of thing. So all of those things are on the table. The first directive, so to speak, that I gave for building the SaaS tools is we're not just going to copy and paste what we're doing on the desktop. We want to take lessons learned, new capabilities, new thoughts in, UI and design and all that kind of stuff, and figure out what is a better way. But we also don't want to just change it to change it. We want, if we do change it, we want that change to be meaningful, not just to be different, that kind of thing.
All right. There's another question here on the dynamic search. Can we do that in the output format?
In the output, I'm assuming you're referring to, like, I open up my Creo Illustrate generated PVZ file into Creo View and be able to do that search. So the dynamic search capability is being added to Creo View 10.1, which would be releasing this December. So today, it's basically an application level capability. It doesn't really have anything to do with the file that you opened or are looking at. It's the application itself is doing this with whatever data that was loaded into it. I'm not sure if that answers the question or not. And this dynamic search is also being implemented in the SaaS versions of the tools as well. That's actually where we did some of the investigation work.
He says, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So we have 3 minutes, your last chance. Well, I wouldn't say your last chance, but last chance in this meeting to ask me questions. And again, for anyone who is interested in providing input to any of these future-looking things that we talked about, whether it's being able to duplicate geometry or create simple geometries for part modeling and those kinds of things, feel free to reach out to me, to reach out through your sales team, that kind of stuff. We're building this for you guys, and I know sometimes it doesn't feel like we hear you guys, but we have literally thousands of customers, and last time I checked, if you include university students, there's over 200,000 users, and everybody wants something. So it's not that we don't want to do all of these things. It's just that we have to prioritize and figure out what has the broader impact. And a lot of that comes from having conversations with folks such as yourselves. So again, feel free to reach out. My email address is very simple. It's just my first initial, last name. So if I go all the way up,
I just dropped it in there.
Slide. Oh, okay. Yeah.
I just dropped it in there. Yeah. And Jeff, would you say the PC community is a good place to also
the PTC community
point people to? Yeah.
Can be, but really that is supposed to be for in essence users helping users. So somebody might pose a question in there, and someone else in the user community can answer, oh, this is how we do that, or those kinds of things. If the software isn't doing what you do, then that should go through tech support. The community should be more in the lines of tips and tricks. There is an area that allows people to submit enhancement requests, and then people can vote on those. We do go through those a couple of times a year to see how those align with what, and don't take this the wrong way, but what the corporate level customer, so to speak. So there's in essence, there's a difference between the individual users that want to be able to do a thing and the corporation that you work for saying they need a thing. And it's all about trying to find that balance between those capabilities. Obviously the corporations weren't necessarily asking for 2D arrowheads and having the leader lines on top, but they were asking for reduced storage capability in Windchill when working with any of our data, not just specifically Creo Illustrate, but so a lot of times it's about trying to find that balance between giving the individual daily driver individuals the capabilities they're looking for, as well as the more enterprise level capabilities.
So I'll follow up. This is being recorded. I will send everybody the recording if you want to refer back to anything. It will be also posted on Arbortech's YouTube channel. But in the email, I'll also send you a link to where is the best place to send your enhancement requests for Creo Illustrate. And sorry, before I forget, Jeff, there was one more question that came through. Is it possible to upgrade from version 6.0?
Oh, yes.
Let me forget that one.
Yes. Yeah, I think currently when we're testing, we test all the way back to 4 right now. I think it is something like that. But yes, you should be able to open your legacy content. Now, if it's that long ago, it might take longer to open because there are things we have to do, like apply a standard to it if it's old enough, or if you're using a version before standards was implemented, then we go through that. If you're using a version before we implemented the timeline for the keyframe-based animation into the sequencer, then we also spend time converting your older version of sequence animation to the newer version of sequenced animation and that kind of thing. But yes, you absolutely can update. You just want to make sure that, like, if you're using Windchill, that the version of Windchill you're using supports the version of Creo Illustrate that you want to use. And that can be found in the graphics compendium.